why they were on the set. Now, Bill Connelly from ESPN.com put up a list of the top 75 quarterbacks in the years since 2000 to now. Here are 6 through 10. He's going to join us here in a minute to kind of go over some of his explanations for this. 6 through 10 for the years 2000 through current, including Robert Griffin III, Marcus Mariota, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. These are the top 10. The rest of the top 10, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Tim Tebow, Vince Young, which would absolutely been in the conversation for number 1, and then Cam Newton 2, and Baker Mayfield and his career at Oklahoma. And he explained it, and now Bill Connelly joins us on ESPN of ESPN.com on 365 Sports. Bill, I did not read the summary of Baker Mayfield, and these lists only get people like really fired up in good ways, bad ways too. Your thoughts about Mayfield over some of what were incredible college football quarterbacks?
Yeah, definitely good ways and bad ways that people get fired up. Yeah, well, it's funny. This was the hardest list. I mean, obviously this is an update of a thing I did a couple of years ago, but this was the hardest list I've ever done because comparing a guy who had the best season, which you would probably think is either Burrow or Newton, or maybe Vince Young even in 2005, to the guys who had the best careers, the best 4-season careers, it was really, really hard. I ended up basically just making a list of the 1-year guys and the 2-year, 3, and 4-year guys, and then just kind of slowly zipped them together. It was a tricky exercise. I was still at peace because, I mean, when you lay out, Mayfield had a Heisman like the others did, and in the playoff appearances, and the raw yardage totals were crazy. I felt okay with it, and I could justify it, but any of those top 5, maybe top 6 or 7 guys could have been number 1.
I know you said it was Baker's whole career. What triggered that for you when you finally got down to the brass tacks of it?
Well, I think when you lay it out, you see 14,000 yards, plus enough of the career. Kind of, obviously, he didn't win a national title, but he checked a lot of those accomplishment boxes too. It really did. Like once you lay it out in 100 whatever touchdowns, it really did just kind of stand out to me. And so I was at peace with it. I kind of knew people were going to yell at me, but again, I mean, whoever I picked at number 1, people who like number 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to yell. So I think it surprised people for sure. But I can sleep at night knowing who I picked. I think I'm okay with it.
Bill, how much did the longevity part of Baker Mayfield play into this versus, let's say, a Joe Burrow, who, if you're thinking of just a sensational single season, he's got to be right there, but it was just a single season?
Yeah, that really was. I mean, you had Newton and Burrow there putting together just one specific year where everything just went perfectly. That did, because I mean, I put the career stats in there, but if you just look at career stats, that doesn't tell him nearly enough of the story. Cam Newton would have been like number 60 or something if you just looked at career stats. So. I mean, I saw those seasons that if you asked me to pick a guy to lead my team in the national title game for one game, I would have probably picked Burrow over Mayfield. But Mayfield just did it so consistently for so long in a way that Burrow didn't. Maybe Burrow just didn't get the chance to. But even the year before the 2019 breakout, he was only fine. I remember heading into 2019, I wrote that I thought he could have a breakout season, and people were scoffing at the idea because he wasn't good enough in 2018. But Mayfield was pretty much as good as he was from that first stop at Texas Tech, and he just continued to produce over a long period of time.
How do you, when you do these lists, and I know that sometimes people look at what they are now rather than what they were in college, the name. Like, you don't have Patrick Mahomes anywhere. It's in the top 75. It's like 50-something, and I'm sure people lose their minds. But how difficult is it sometimes to separate who they were in college rather than who they are now as maybe a star in the NFL?
Yeah, that's typically where stats can help, because the first step, I mean, obviously it's not just a stat exercise. I have my own memories, my own opinions, and everything else. Mm-hmm. But starting with the stats, like taking the top 100 passers of every year going back to 2000 and just kind of laying it all out and adjusting for era and kind of spitting out an initial ranking that is based purely on stats. That's kind of a good step for that, because I will move guys up and down from there. But if you just started naming quarterbacks, then Patrick Mahomes would have probably been in the top 20. but then you kind of adjust for everything you knew to adjust for, and I thought he had ended up in a more proper spot. He's clearly the best quarterback on earth at this exact moment in time, but I was comfortable not putting him in the top 20 just because of arm talent and adjusting for everything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many blasts from the past on this list, Bill. Ken Dorsey at 36, and I don't, like, when I say this about him, I said this a lot, I'm not disparaging him. I'm telling you how good the rest of the team was. He was the worst player on the team. And that's not bad. It's just like, if you probably ask him that, he'd probably say the same thing, because those teams, especially in 2001, were so amazingly good.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that he almost threw for 10,000 yards, rarely trailing, not ever having to throw all that many passes. Like, when he was asked to throw, he did do a very good job of it. It was just, like I compared him to Mac Jones in the write-up. Mac Jones was almost perfect in 2020, but, he didn't even win the Heisman because everybody saw that his supporting cast and thought, okay, well, somebody else should probably get this Heisman. But, those are really hard. Like David Green, just kind of sneaked into the top 75. Who, when he finished his career at Georgia, I believe he was the winningest quarterback in, I think it was SEC history. He could have been a lot higher. He threw for 10,000 yards and won a lot of games. So that one was kind of a tricky one, but he had a very good supporting cast too. So it was hard to kind of separate accomplishment from raw talent and everything else, but you just lay out the stats in the record. He had to go pretty high.
You have 75, and there are probably 130 that you had to kind of weed through. It's part of, like, nominations for any kind of award, and then you get down to it. Was there somebody that, once you went through it again and again and again, that kind of surprised you, was as high, and I mean like in the top 15 or 20 than you thought?
Well, I mean, Baker definitely surprised me. When I set out doing this exercise from the start, I would have assumed he was kind of top 5-ish or top 10-ish. But once I just kind of laid out all the evidence, he ended up higher than I expected. Marcus Mariota was another one. He goes back, going back and kind of laying out what he did. Over 5,000 combined passing and rushing yards in 2014 alone, winning the Heisman, taking Oregon to the national title game. That was one where I'd have probably guessed top 20 and not top 10. But it just, it kind of, like I said, when you start with the stats, you see them first, and it kind of just, that kind of shocked me a little bit. Robert Griffin III, actually, he ended up 10th. That was a tricky one. I don't know where I would have assumed he would end up at the start of the exercise, but based purely on statistics, you could almost justify him being a little higher than 10th. So that one, I don't know if it probably didn't sneak up on your readers, but I think for other readers, maybe it sneaked up on them a little, outside of Waco at least.
Did that also, and you mentioned this, that he took over a program when he got to Baylor, he and Art Briles came in together, that they were terrible, like bad, and had been for a decade and a half. And what he did during his time there to get him to a bowl game, to then get him into a Heisman situation, how much did that influence the vote?
Yeah, I mean, having almost 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns as a senior, but then also turning Baylor's entire football program around. Not that he did it single-handedly or anything, but yeah, I mean, I remember that 2008 game when he had signed and he was willing them to whatever the record was that first year, 4-8, 5-7. I remember they lost to Missouri, but he was probably the best player on the field. Like, that was kind of a signal that things were going to change, and then he just proceeded to get better and better for each of the next 3 seasons, barring the knee injury. So that was a fantastic career, and obviously he had the stats to back it up.
Now, I do notice that you did leave a Heisman Trophy winner, a couple of them, out of this. Like, in that, when you, like, Chris Winkie not on the list, and he was right at the beginning. He was 2000, so I get that. But, like, when did you, like, have to get that line of, like, okay, these awards in certain context of the year can't be weighted as much?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the original criteria was. If it was that you had to play at least half your career or at least 2 years in the 2000s. So I don't think Winkie quote unquote qualified. And I want to say that Phillip Rivers didn't either. That's why he's not on there. So I don't, again, this was 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember what that specifically was, but yeah, like that was turn of the century guys were kind of weird because some of them did make the list and I counted their 99 stats and it got a little confusing, but that's my own fault for defining the parameters, I guess.
Did you ever look back at how many, and this is just off the top of my head, what coach had the most quarterbacks among your top 75?
I don't remember coach, but I remember Oklahoma. The OU football Twitter program put out a graphic when I first put out the list of all their different guys on there. So I know I'm pretty sure they had the most guys in the top 40 or 50. So maybe that means the answer is Stoops. But I mean, Saban at this point, you think about what McCarron's on the list, Young's on the list, Mac Jones is on the list, Tua's on the list. So he has a few on there himself, I guess.
And did you mention Bryce Young? You probably did, yeah.
Yeah.
Colt McCoy at 12. I think he could have been anywhere from like 6, 8, 7, 9, whatever, 12. That's where he landed. Put up incredible numbers. Had they won and not been hurt against Alabama, had they won that national championship, would that have been like, okay, you got to be a part of the top 10?
Yeah, you think maybe adding a national title to his overall resume. It was already a ridiculous resume, and I'm certainly, considering he was one spot ahead of Johnny Manziel, I think a lot of Texas and A&M fans noticed that ranking. But, he was obviously really close. I said like the top 5 or so could have been number 1. You look at basically, 6 through 17, any of those guys, down to like Matt Leinart and whatnot, any of those could have been in the kind of 6, 7, 8 range. This was a tricky exercise. I mean, you just list these guys out, you can probably come up with 25 guys you think should have been in the top 10, really.
By the way, former Baylor coach Art Briles with 3, Robert Griffin III, Case Keenum, and then Kevin Cobb was on the list as well from the 2 times that they were at the University of Houston. So
Bryce Petty was almost there. He was one of the guys that was under consideration for that. There was a little clump of guys from about 73 to 80, and Petty was in that list.
You had Colin Klein 41, Eric Crouch 45. Basically almost the same, maybe a little bit more power with Klein. With Crouch had the dazzling speed and the Heisman Trophy. Those two are almost the same guys, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, Colin Klein, I think that just the human 3rd and 4 conversion, he was just so automatic in those ways that it made that team so dangerous. They were so good and efficient in ways that you shouldn't be. And so that certainly resonated. That stuck with me. He was a tough guy to go against.
Bill, thanks for your time. The lister. What was the feedback? Do you have comments after the story? I'm not sure if that's – I can't even imagine.
Yeah, because, I mean, we all think our quarterback was the best. And so, Cincinnati fans have been mad because I didn't squeeze Desmond Ridder on there. And he was certainly in that – he was close. But everybody has their favorite quarterback, and you list them all out, you would have ended up with a top 250. So it was kind of this is an exercise that is designed to get everybody pretty fired up, and I think it probably succeeded at that.
Bill, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. The project again on ESPN.com. The best quarterbacks, the top 75 of the 2000s, and to give you saw.